Hello and welcome to another episode of Storytime podcast. I'm here with Chief and Kiwi, and today's guest is also Chameleon on, and we are going to be going over the Life's Turn series on this episode. So welcome, and let's get into the story.
Thanks for having me, Rose. It's always a pleasure to be on your team,
It's an honor to have you here.
if I do say so myself. This is Life's Turn. The chapter is Life's Turn. Our story is one of many that float on the winds of time. It tells of a tale of how love can be lost in the blink of an eye. Our story begins with a mother of what? Our story begins with a mother in a village inside her lodge. My bad, I skipped a word. Preparing that morning's meal for her and her two small ones. The latter on the floor of the lodge playing with their carved animals that their father had made them so long ago, it seems. As she cuts the various things she intends to cook, she begins to think back to how it came to be only her and her two boys. This is something she doesn't like to think about, but on occasion she can't help but do so. She remembers it was just as the winds of winter were coming to the village some 6 winters ago. Back to when the youngest of the boys were barely 2 winters in this world, and the older maybe 4 winters old. Their father had went out with a war party that had been, war party went out with a war party that had been terrorizing the surrounding villages, and so her husband went out to fight a war party that had been terrorizing the surrounding villages, and so her husband and a band of other men had left to go protect the village. This left her and the boys in the lodge going about the normal day's workings. All is calm within the village when word begins to spread that a great tragedy has befallen someone in the village. No one is certain of who, but all are sure it does not appear good. Hearing this, the mother instructs the boys to stay in the lodge, and she walks to the village center where everyone is gathered. It is only when she gets there that she is told that her husband has been gravely injured, and that a group of 4 braves found him while they were out looking for meat for the band of protectors sent out that day. They had sent a young boy who had went with them ahead to tell the village of what has happened. It is after hearing this that the mother's eyes fill with tears, with many of the women of the village offering words of strength and comfort, but it does little to stop her tears. Distraught and needing to be alone, the mother walks from the crowd and back to her lodge. Once she Once there, she takes a moment to compose herself before entering the lodge, as not to upset her children. And so, as she opens the door, she tries her hardest to make it appear nothing is wrong. But deep down, she knows if it is true that their father has been gravely wounded, it may not make the trip back to the village alive, that things will be very hard for them unless she can bring herself to remarry one day. To be continued.
It does sound very similar to one of the other ones, but then again, as I was saying earlier, sometimes you're reading them and it's like, again, we've read them just not in this now, and I have not read this one,
Yeah.
so I have no recollection of reading this one physically. I would continue on because it's kind of like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, of course it is. That's how I write them
I know.
there, buddy. Okay. This is Life Goes On. Our story is one of many that float on the winds of time. It tells of a strong mother of 2 boys. Our story begins with the mother of the 2 small ones having just returned from the village center where she learned the terrible news that her husband and the father of the children had been gravely injured, and it was not certain that he would make the trip from where he had been discovered by the hunting party of four braves alive. After taking a moment to compose herself outside the lodge, the mother had again entered and once again set about finishing preparations of their meal the family would eat that morning. Trying her hardest to not break down in front of the children, she sets to work cutting the various things she needs for the stew she was preparing, before leaving to learn what was wrong at the village center. It is while doing this that the knife she is using to cut the food slips and she cuts her hand. With this, she can't help the tears that start to fall. Her oldest son sees the tears and goes to his mom, wrapping his arms around her in a hug so full of love that she can't help but smile through her tears. And know, though even if the worst of news comes that day, that she'll do everything she can to make sure her boys have the happiest of lives. To be continued.
So, show portraying the how much she's dedicated to her family right now and the two boys. I do see
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And the fact that she doesn't want to distress them. Um, it goes, shows the love that she has. Just trying to continue life
Mm-hmm.
as 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 if things have just got to go on. It's really hard to continue life when in a situation like that. She's but yeah, she's got to sort of and having to explain it to the little ones too. That is going to be something again, um, because
Grammy,
it's
you obviously don't remember this story. Are you
yeah,
ready for
I
the
do.
curveball?
I,
You ready? Ready?
I'm
You got your
reading.
bat ready on your shoulder?
I'm reading this.
Are
I've
you
got the
ready?
story in front of me.
I was going to point out the
I,
aspect of how, again, cutting her hand, she wasn't staying in the now, which is something you're practicing. The more that again, you focus on something, the more that you bring it towards you. But again, the injury itself is reflective. She's afraid of having a gravely, her husband being or injured and whatnot, and yet she injures herself in the process.
Yeah.
It's very reflective. Again, when we
But it
worry about.
could also be taken as she's so focused on not showing or even
Mm-hmm.
the kids maybe picking up on something being wrong that she's not as careful with the knife as what she should be.
yeah,
Right.
more concentrating on what she's doing.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
we
ready
all
for the
have
next one.
times in our life.
Okay. This is hold on. This is Life's Choice. Our story is one of many that float on the winds of time. It is the end of the story of a strong mother who was on the journey of raising two young boys. Our story begins inside the lodge of the mother and her family. The mother, having just cut her hand while preparing a meal for her family, holds her oldest son, who, having noticed his mother's tears, had wrapped his arms around her and filled her saddened heart with so much love that she found herself smiling through her tears. She knows that if her husband and the father of the boys doesn't make it to the village alive and is unable to be mended back to health, that she must fill both roles of parent, something she never thought she would have to do. And as she lets go of the hug of her son, she turns her attention back to the cut on her hand and wraps it with a strip of dried buckskin. It is then that one of the women from the village comes rushing in to tell the mother that the hunting party has returned and that her husband has made it to the village alive, but barely so. They both rush to the village center where everyone is gathered. She pushes her way to the middle of the middle of the circle of people and falls to her knees next to her husband, who is covered with two blankets which are wet with his blood. She takes his hand in hers, but before she can say anything to her love, he takes his last breath on Mother Earth, which causes her to scream and cry uncontrollably. After a time, when all in the village had given their words of sorrow and comfort, the grieving woman stands from the side of her husband. After telling him her love one last time, she rushes to her lodge and collects the two boys, telling them that they are going to the woods and not to question her or make any noise to alert anyone in the village. They walk as quickly as they can past the body of her husband, which she doesn't tell the boys is him, and off into the woods, where she leads them to a tall pine tree and tells them to stay there until someone finds them, again telling them not to question her. She tells them she loves them, but this is the way it must be, and so ends the story of the mother who'd do anything for her children. As for what happened to the boys, that's another story for another time. To be continued.
I had
What do
forgotten
you
there
think?
that
Do you think? What
that
do you think? What do you think?
I actually think that's quite selfish of her. I really do, because not only have they lost their father, but the fact that she's taken the boys and she's gone off somewhere, um, and left them all alone. That to me is, yeah, that's selfishness as far as I can see.
It's attachment. Attachment to the love so much of another person that it's destroyed the rest, or even destroyed the rest of her life because
Yes,
that attachment. So does she love the husband and that life more than she loves the boys? But even though it's said,
that's
clearly stated, that she loves the boys.
yeah. That's why I sort of look at that as being selfish. Yeah, I know how you can detach from the world through grief.
Mm-hmm.
I know that from personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of wonder, because I also know a young lady that lost her husband 12 months after Paul passed away, and she had a little fella, and she seemed to be coping so much better than me. A, I think she was younger, and B, because she had the responsibility of having to bring up her child. So to think, I just find it so hard to think that the maternal instinct was not as strong, that she could do that.
Yeah, it's being instead of
But maybe she did it.
good.
Maybe she did it to keep herself from having to lose anything else.
Yes, but isn't that selfish?
I don't know. Some people can't take loss.
I know. I said, yeah, I know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think that for me personally, if I'd had the responsibility of young ones, it would have been easier to cope, because you've got those responsibilities. You know that you've still got to get up in the morning and get those children fed and clothed, and this day and age sort of off to school or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just not even bothering to get out of bed, because you didn't have to. And therefore you wallow deeper in your grief because you
But,
don't have.
but like Rose was going to say, maybe it was a codependency thing. Maybe she did see a path forward with just her and the kids. So
And she wasn't
rather
seeing
than having to take on that burden,
right.
basically, she would rather not really discard them, but maybe go and take them somewhere where she wouldn't have to see them quote unquote suffer or you know.
It could just be she couldn't see her own inner strength, her inner light. Again, a codependency creates this need, this attachment for another person in order to survive. But like as you were saying, Kiwi, with again having that inner strength to carry on without having to depend on another remarry, you know what I mean? Even though it was suggested, It almost was like just a complete snap break. And some people cope with it differently.
Yeah, yeah. We all
Hmm.
cope with it in our own way. Yeah. And it's and I suppose if you put it back into the context of the time that the story was written in, not in our modern time, but
Well, we
maybe
could
back
also
then
see it
we
in the
don't know.
modern time too,
Yeah,
because
but we
there are people that have kids and just leave them off the side of the road, or you know.
yeah, yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
we could see it in the modern time.
Yeah, but in context to your story, I don't know much about what would happen within a tribal situation like that. But for all we know, she may have been forced to remarry, and that's why another reason, I suppose, why she didn't want to stay. I know in some cultures that is a must, but I don't know about within your culture. Um,
Uh,
so maybe that. I mean, that could be a reason why she did do it, so that she wasn't forced to remarry someone that could have caused her boys strife in their life. So
uh,
looking at it from point of view, then I can understand to a degree why she did do it. So yeah,
Bit of a controversial, almost ending there, huh?
Almost
yeah,
ending.
it's good.
Because there's one last part to the story.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say it's not allowed. She has to go back to the boys. But anyway,
Hey, the grandma got mad about that one too when I first read it. She was like, "She stop it. She should have just womaned up and." I was like,
It's
"Grandma,
my
it's just a
maternal
story."
instinct.
That's
My
why. That's
maternal instinct.
because with that one too, I had two endings, but I was like, I'm gonna choose the ending that's gonna upset Grandma.
Oh, you're terrible.
I'm not. I'm just good at poking fun at people.
I
But
know.
this is the ending. Ending. This is grandmother. One legend said to drift on the winds of time tells of a grandmother and her two grandsons. Our story begins with the grandmother alone in the teepee preparing dinner for three. It is as she cuts the wild onions, potatoes, and venison for that night's meal that she begins to think back to when she found her grandsons. She remembers it was a day she was out gathering wild berries when she heard the cries of a child far off in the distance and made haste to go investigate. After walking a distance and stopping many times to make sure of the direction, she comes upon the children seated under a large pine. One is crying while the other looks around with his arms around his brother, quietly comforting him. As she approaches the children, the one who's crying stops, and they both eye her wearily. Once she is close enough for them to hear, she asks them, "Grandsons, why are you alone in the woods at this time of day?" To which the older replies, after eyeing her a moment longer, "We lost our way while out playing. We are very scared. Will you help us?" Not knowing of any village close by, she asks, "Do you know which direction is your home?" They shake their heads no, which causes her to think a moment. And after seeing no other solution, she says to them, "You are welcome to come with me. I shall feed you, and you will have a place to lay your heads this night." Her memory of that day is interrupted as her grandsons enter the teepee, both carrying a load of fish. They rush to her with their bounty in hand. "Grandmother, grandmother, we have caught many fish from the stream." "I see that," she says. "Mine are bigger," says the older brother. "No, mine are bigger," says the younger. "They will make a great many meals for us all in the coming days," she says. With that, the bickering stops as both boys wait to see what else their grandmother has to say. She turns for her cutting of the ingredients to tell them, "Go now and cook the meat on the fire so we can eat dinner." Both boys grab the cooking sticks offered to them along with their grandmothers and rush to the fire. She watches for a moment, smiling at the knowledge that her grandsons will grow into fine men, for they were taught the old ways. They are so similar, but yet so different at the same time. The older of the two being so decisive when it came to any situation that faced the three of them each day, and the younger knowing the stories passed down through the history of their people. They will no doubt make the ancestors proud, but more importantly, they will be great leaders, with or without the title of chief of any village they decide to settle in one day. Her eyes fill with tears at these thoughts, and that is where our story ends, or does it?
Or does it? So I'm gonna look at some of the similarities that I see with. Well, there's a few myths that come into mind. Again, you have two brothers, but you have sort
Uh,
of the setup. We have Romulus and Remus, which are Greek or Roman mythology, who discovered Rome, and they were twins, and they were kind of at each other's throats when they were adults. But you see that dynamic relationship as they're kids, and they're arguing over who's got the better fish, who's got the
uh,
bigger one. But that also goes back to Cain and Abel, where again you're going back even further into like Hebrew mythology and looking at the Abel and Cain's story. One brother was
yeah.
favored over the other and so murdered the other brother. So you have this kind of dynamic with twins, and it's also seeing where does that come from? Where does the rivalry even kind of come from? The two differences, um, and it could be again from just being that abandoned that we saw, that apart that they were just kind of abandoned or left in the woods, even though they said they got lost. Um, and it's funny they say they were lost in the woods and they're playing, but it's more of maybe they were trying to save face with the mother, that maybe they
Uh,
couldn't understand that they were abandoned. Maybe it was just more of, okay, play here and I'll be back, and she just didn't come back. So just a thought.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's what I was thinking along those lines too. That she's taken them and told them to stay there, but just go and play.
Hmm.
Yeah, like you said, so when somebody came along, well, what are you doing here? We're playing, because that's what they were told. Um, and whether it was a blood grandmother or a surrogate grandmother, she still loved those two boys regardless. Um, once she had found them, so
I mean, that's in Romulus and Remus myth. They were founded by as infants by what would be called a she wolf, a wolf
yeah,
who suckled them.
yeah,
So again, you're talking
yeah,
about somebody who had mother instincts. They were already had motherling instincts. So you
yeah,
have that
yeah,
aspect in there.
yeah. Yeah, that very strong maternal bond, no matter who or what, you're prepared to help bring up children, or I mean even animals. People nurture animals when they find them as well. So it's still, yeah, the maternal bond, I think. And I mean, and you see it also in fathers too, that that paternal bond. You go and watch a father and a children playing in a park and laughing and carrying on, and you see it there. Maybe not so much these, now as what I may have done 20 years ago, but then by the same token, when I was brought up with like my father, he was what you class as a typical Englishman. Children were seen and not heard.
Mhm.
Um, so we didn't have a lot of interaction with our father, but that doesn't mean to say that he didn't love us. It's you've got to have both maternal and paternal, male, female, um, feminine, masculine, because we all embody both of them within our bodies, and so we have to, for the female, allow that side to come out, which sometimes I wonder about these days. But yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a shift in that
Just
energy. It's even like we're talking about like this, there's the twin flame of those that aren't on a twin flame journey, but those that are balancing the energies within themselves, the feminine, masculine. There are feminines right now that embody a masculine type energy. They're more leaders. They're more in that mode, but yet they still have that mothering side if they're balanced, that nurturing side. So you have that dynamic. And then we're also seeing, like you said, in believe that came up today within certain collective reads, but that people today are, again, you have masculines who are into more of the feminine part. The feminine parts, I would say, the intuitive part, the unseen, is starting to become seen, which would be the yin side of yin yang. So now you're seeing this dark part. Everything's coming into the light. In which case, the ones that would be more be in society have been more submissive or more unseen, is now becoming seen, and that's shifting these energies, this paradigm here. And it's, you're getting that shift in, we see it within the children coming in now, you see it within society, how everything is kind of in a bit chaotic or up in the air.
yeah, yeah. I think sort of something that I read this morning in one of our papers, and it was a mother that had so severely damaged her child that at 21 he has the mentality of a 3-year-old. And so to me, I sort of can't quite fathom where their maternal instinct in those people went, that they could harm a child like that. I know it happens every day in every land, but yeah. And then just thinking about how the grandmother took those 2 little boys under her wings and nurtured them and taught them the old ways so that they knew how to look after themselves when, as they got older and grew into men. Men that she could be proud of. It's just, it's amazing what humans can do to each other, good or bad.
Yeah.
But did you look at it this way, Rose? Maybe they didn't make it out from underneath that pine tree.
Well, yeah, I
Just
mean,
saying. It's
yeah,
all about perspective.
this may be even, again, their safe space that they're even dreaming about, dream within a dream.
Yeah, I never thought of it from that avenue.
I mean, think about it, Romulus and Remus, even right down to it's a she-wolf that was suckling them, which they grew up to then find Rome and became great leaders, which is kind of implied at the end, even with or without the title of chief of any village, they were, the ancestors are making them proud. So this is also about just even that survival.
Yeah.
And putting people, again, so you're put in that situation, you're talking about, again, maternal instinct, what we see nowadays. And think about it as, we have people nowadays that are, their inner child hasn't been healed enough to cultivate that nurturing side. It's not been there.
Yeah.
So, and that does come, like we said, codependent relationship, when you're very dependent on and not having the self-reliance or self-confidence. You're not like your inner child. And actually, it's funny because that did come up today in the reading I did, where you're talking about how, if you think of your inner child, most children nowadays, if you ask them to, like, they're going to go play, they don't actually look around and see who's watching. They're going to go play. You know what I mean? They're not going to look around and see if somebody's watching that I'm doing this. Is it bad? That mentality of the morals of it, is it bad or good, or if they're going to get yelled at or whatnot, that's instilled upon, parents. But if you put them outside and you say go play, they're going to go play, they're going to go do stuff, climb trees, have that confidence, not worry about if they're going to break a bone. There's no worry. In a way, it's more of this air of freedom.
How many of them now, young ones nowadays, actually have been given any of that freedom? They've banned so many things here out of playgrounds just in case someone hurts themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that if I fell off a tree and I bruised myself, well, then I wouldn't fall out of a tree, hopefully, again. Trees, they're not allowed to climb trees. They're not allowed to, so much that they're not allowed to do unless it's inside attached to a piece of electronics.
Yep. You have that where today's
Yeah.
society is, to raise a child is here's a cell phone. Here's a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's a
Sit
tablet.
them in,
Yeah.
yeah. Sit them in front of the TV,
It's
That's why I'm glad I had my grandma growing up. She was better than
Yeah.
any television show.
That's where
Yeah.
where the stories come from. It's kind of apparent, like, and maybe not. I haven't been as delved in too much of it, but I feel that it's gotten worse with the technology because, like I said, even going to a particular venue the other night and watching 8-year-olds with their phones, with cell phones on their phones, and you're going, they're 8, 9 years old, and I'm looking at them like they're talking on phones like they're in a business meeting, and I'm going, and I'm like, this is not, what is this?
Yeah, this is, you put them outside and give them a climbing frame, they probably wouldn't know what to do.
No.
I only ever had one broken bone when I was growing up, but I was lucky. But it wasn't an issue, I was allowed to go out and play and
That's because your healthcare system is free. Here, your kid breaks a bone, you're paying $1,200.
See,
I didn't stop to think of it like that. Yeah.
So you have that fear on people. Do you see how that equates into people being that afraid? Like even then, that goes with the story. The woman was so afraid that she's not going to remarry. She's not going to have the support. She's not going to have somebody, her protectors, right? She's not going to have that. It's in the same kind of society dynamic where it's like, okay, well, who's the protector? You know what I mean? Like, if you get injured, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. You have that fear hanging over it because of the systems that we're currently in, what they're in right now, what we're in right now.
Yeah. Whereas, like here, if you're injured here and you're working and you can't work for 6, 8 months, 12 months, you will get a minimum of 80% of your income, of what your income was, and if you're injured at work, and your employer will make it up to the 100% mark, as well as all the free hospitalisation. I think you have to pay a minimum for like physiotherapy and that, but it might be $20 or $30 that you can claim that back as well. But that's. But I still think it's sad that so many young people aren't allowed to go and experiment in life and play in the mud puddles and dig in the sand and climb a tree and try and play Mary Poppins off their parents' garage roof, with the umbrella.
And then break their leg.
No, actually,
and then
I fell off a horse.
I just go out there and break their other leg. Just because if I'm going to pay for one broken leg, I might as well pay for 2 broken legs.
Yeah, no, I fell off the horse and broke my wrist, but yeah. But it shows within the different worlds, just, the societies, like, I don't know how I'd cope living somewhere like in America where you had to pay for all your medical and everything like that. It would be I would be in a pretty sad state at some stage, I think. Because if you get ill here and you go to the hospital, you go to the public hospital, it's all free regardless of what it is. If you're having a heart attack, everything is free. Although people here have medical insurance, we used to until Paul retired, and the price of it just got out of control. But we could let it go knowing that we had the alternative of free medical. It might not be as quick, but we still had it,
Well, Does it also raise the cost of living? I mean, we're already living in a place where the cost of living is, we're seeing it now with inflation right now going up. We're already paying
Yeah,
taxes for some ridiculous things right now.
yeah. Well, we pay tax on everything. We
Mhm.
pay tax on our groceries, on our power, our utilities. Everything is taxed. You know, I just was reading before that in the last month, the cost of living here has gone up something like 23.5% on the same time as last year. Well, that's a massive increase, man.
Yeah.
You know,
It
I
used to
think we'll have
be.
to go back to the days of the giants and grow our
That's
own
a
veggies.
scary number.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
very scary number. What
it
the
is.
where we're at is um an alert, but that's scary.
Now, can you imagine? Because I mean, I've worked retail before, but the reason why we would get so many coming across the border from Canada has free health, free medical insurance, but they pay the taxes on everything as well. They would come here to
Yeah,
actually just buy certain things, just like clothing and food, because it's cheaper here. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
what are you weighing? So you have the free medical, it's awesome, but you're also where
Um,
you're coming here because everything
I've,
costs so much.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
known them to come here for medical care because they don't want to wait and die.
That
You
too.
know, and
yeah, yeah.
waiting,
I don't
ridiculous.
think we've quite got that bad here. It has got worse since COVID because
Yeah.
a lot of our nursing staff had to leave their employment and our doctors. Um, so you know, it's made it a lot harder to get in. Um, by the same token, if it's a medical emergency, like a major heart attack or something like that, people get put aside and you get taken in. So
Oh,
it's
really? Well, see,
yeah,
that's the thing here. The hospital can't turn you away. So there's a lot of bills that don't get paid.
yeah, yeah. Well, you don't get billed here, so
And actually, you know, if you'll get it, that the Medicaid covers, you know, if you really are uh, destitute, you know, you got to be somewhat bad off.
yeah,
But that covers everything,
yeah, yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. You know, all of our prices include GST, which is goods and service tax. So you really and it's I think it's up to 17% now, but it's all included in the price. So you don't even stop to work out what actually you're paying. And as some people call it, the get stuff tax. Um, you know, so it's just because it's there, you pay it. You know.
My heart tells me, you know, let's have, medical for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
But um,
It should be
the
free
whole the
and
whole putting the
equivalent.
government in charge of everything is scary. First off,
We'll also tie
Yeah.
this into
you
energy healing now. So it's not that medical system isn't great. It's that, well, now we have the ability to heal with energy. So, and you see that in the healing community. As
Yeah.
you said, the body wants to be healed. Why are we, again, why it's a way to scare you. Again, if you fear yourself into what you focus on, like in the beginning of that story where she didn't want her fear to show, but yet she was still kind of in a way focusing on it, and she ended up cutting herself. So if we're
Yeah.
focusing on the fear, that's what we're manifesting in. We're manifesting in a worst case scenario. So the more and we've seen it in the doctor system, I've seen the medical system, been there, done that, where it's like they guilt you into, you're going to be blind in 10 years if you don't take these meds. They're trying to tell you that you're going to die in a year if you don't take this. To fear that into you, because if they can control you that way, then you manifest that way, knowing that we manifest with our mind, instead of going, hey, the body wants to be healed. We know this.
they make
Yeah.
money on people being ill,
Hmm.
and even without having nefarious thoughts and actions. I mean, the system's kind of built that way that rewards, and then conversely, if everybody that had cancer was healed tomorrow, um that's a lot of income coming in that's
A
not
lot
going
of
to come
income being
in.
lost.
Very
Yeah.
much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can remember when I was 12, 13, 14, I used to get really severe migraine. And for some reason, they always started on a Friday afternoon and they'd all be gone by Sunday night so I could go back to school Monday. But my old uncle used to come in and he was a Rosicrucianist and a spiritual healer. And he would come in, and if I had a migraine, and he would put his hands on my head and he would start and he would get to a certain frequency in his humming and he would actually take the pain away
Hmm.
using his voice as a frequency modulator.
That's really cool.
Hmm.
You know, so that, so I think I've said before, maybe not on the podcast, but having been brought up in a household that where something like that was quite acceptable, all of this is nothing. I don't find anything scary or too way out in it because it's been with me all my life. It got left behind and it's now resurging.
Hmm.
So it was something that I just took for granted because it was in our everyday life.
Yeah. And it's,
I mean, even when I went through my journey, having had cancer and gone through big pharma and everything, but I looked on the whole thing as a journey, not as a death sentence. And now I've been 14 years clear. And but I had no fear of it even back then. I didn't realize what I was actually projecting back then because I wasn't on the path I'm on now where I can actually look back and say, hey, I subconsciously was doing this. And yeah, and so for me, it was just a big learning experience. And, it's amazing just looking back. Hindsight's a great thing, but I'm very thankful that I'm still here. Yeah, but it was very interesting. But I think a lot of us, maybe in our younger days, some of us start on a path into some sort of spirituality, and then we get sidetracked by modern appliances and modern things and wanting this and wanting that, and we leave it aside. And sometimes a big kick in the backside is what we actually need to get us going again.
yeah. There's another
Well, with that,
Oh, go ahead.
I've embraced the whole modern technology thing. That's why I use like Discord and all that to get the stories out there. I'm using the technology to not only give someone a glimpse into the culture, but also be like, hey, I'm carrying on that by writing stories that could be interpreted even into the modern time. You don't just have to read about the old stories, come and read some of my newer ones.
Sure.
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
That's
you
actually
got
where,
tired of how long it took you to get into town with the horse and buggy?
Yeah.
well, I mean, that's where I feel like we're using technology in the wrong way. It's like here's this, like we were saying, here's this beautiful, we got these phones, we have all this information at our fingertips, and what are we doing? We're watching videos of cats licking their butt. I'm like, why are we? And you're
Wow,
raising your using,
bros. Thanks for that.
but
Thanks for that glimpse into your life.
Bro, this, this is a
I'm just saying,
G-rated show.
Right?
There
It's
goes our
not.
G-rated.
It's not.
Don't judge my YouTube history.
It's not. But again,
No.
it's just what are we utilizing it for? I mean, it's not a way to raise our kids. And then what are the content and what are what is it that you're really teaching right now? But there was an aspect I was going to bring up of the story, and um, some of that may have to do with when I'm painting. But the aspect of her leaving, I just wanted to go back to this because it just struck me. Her leaving the children is like again what you call I think we talked about it. You said water babies the other night, but
Yeah.
about the woman that it's like it's an urban legend, a woman that drowns her children and basically she becomes the wailing woman. She screams and
Yeah.
she basically pulls other people to their death in a way, but she in a way same thing.
Um,
It's like she leaves her children to die. She doesn't, and then she's wailing because why did she do it? That's her like what she's stuck in.
yeah.
So it's just kind of funny that struck with that as well. But it's kind of where we're at, where we're talking about society. We want to take care of our children, and then we have people that are wailing because my children died, and they're going to blame it on so and so, or it's this teacher's fault, or whatever. They weren't paying attention, and it's like, what are we teaching our kids, though? Are you?
Yeah. Where are we teaching our children responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
In all aspects, whether it's climbing a tree or whatever.
What is it
Yeah, I
with
mean,
you
I,
and
I use
climbing
modern
trees, Grandma?
technology. I love trees. I hug trees. I talk to trees.
I bet you $100 you could not climb a tree right now, this day,
I haven't got a tree around this
without
time.
falling and hurting yourself.
I could probably do it, but I haven't got a tree around here that's got low enough branches for me to start with. Remember, I'm short.
Me too.
Yeah. I need something that's got branches like, 2 foot off the ground so that I can get up. But the you put me off my topic. I use modern technology, and I mean I think that even in medicine and that there is some of the skills some of these surgeons have for repairing damage and things like that. I mean it is absolutely amazing. So I'm not against modern things like that.
Even with that, they're starting to let the robots take over. So the surgeon's could be in a whole nother state probably pretty soon, and he could just be laying there on a beach somewhere and have the thing on his iPad, and he'll be cutting you open and all that with a robot.
I mean, I can kind of see that because, and I'll bring up with me being an artist again with the painting I've been working on as well, is that they have something called AI art. Basically, computer paints the art, and I go, well, that's.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. I've watched it. I'm like, why are they like? But again, so what? You can train. You could program a computer to do that. How is it amazing though that you have a person that's doing that? That's more skill than a computer that you program to do it. So, but it's
because you could see that you could probably make a computer that can generate a story too, but that story won't be the same as somebody that actually took the time to actually sit down and either write it or type it or however their medium is going to be. That's not going to be the same story as what a computer would come up with.
And there are actually, it's funny you said that, before the art thing, I believe it was last year, they had it where AI was, they were taking movie scripts, or they would have the AI watch a movie and then rewrite, like do a summary of what the story was. And it would come out completely horribly false, but sometimes very accurate and blunt. But it's the same thing. It's like, well, how is that? I mean, that takes away from the story. It takes away from the movie. It takes away from the experience.
It's not art.
No, it's not. It's kind of why.
That's like in schools, they've completely taken art or anything creative out of your school. It's just here, sit down, read this book, spew out the facts that are in the book, and there you go. Here's your piece of paper. Go make your way in the world.
Basically, yeah. It's just getting you to the next level without you actually experiencing it, seeing it, feeling it, touching it. But also, how much of that information is false anyway? That's the other thing, is they're teaching. They're not even teaching the correct information.
Yeah.
So
Except here, there was one class. There is one class here that is U history, and they actually use the book, the original book, the U history book that my grandmother helped write. By the way,
nice.
so they actually went to a bunch of, I think it was like 3 or 4 elders, and they asked them all about, because they know the most about that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And my grandma was one of the people that helped them write that. So it's actually pretty accurate.
That's a good thing. Again, we don't see that
Yeah.
in the. It's not in the public schools here. Again, going through them, I learned more of. We were, I grew up pretty poor, so we learned more going, I would say going to the library, but actually just traveling around and looking at actual historical markers. We'd pick one out and then we would go
Yeah.
research it. I learned more outside of school than I did in school. In school, it was pretty
Yeah.
much the same thing that you learned every year after year, and it was very clean cut, like cookie cutter. And I'm like, but I
Yeah.
feel like all of it wasn't being portrayed. Where's the experience? Where's like when you're reading it, it's like you're reading the story, you want to be immersed into it, into an experience. You want to know about somebody's, what they're writing as a diary, a blog, like what did they write about, what was their journal entries. You want to know what it feels like, and instead everything is very, it's very like surgical, very, there's no aesthetic to it, it's very bland. So you're not, are you, no wonders our kids don't retain certain information, because it's like, why would they want, you're saying that creativity, we take all of that out, and of course none of the brain is activated, it doesn't become activate for that learning process. It's a shut off.
Mm.
It's pretty sad.
It's like in schools they don't teach you about using natural products to heal yourself, herbs, and they don't teach you about frequencies, and they don't teach you. They just don't teach general life skills anymore.
Mm-mm.
They it's all. I mean, I know some children. Their school was what they class here as a paper-free school, and
Yeah.
they just used tablets all the time, and
Mm.
their handwriting was atrocious.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm
Because
32
hey,
years old. My handwriting is atrocious. Do not judge those tiny children.
I'm all for I'm all for school vouchers. And then the parent decides where the child goes to school. Maybe a charter school, maybe a private school. If the public schools have to compete, maybe they'll get good too.
They don't
yeah,
though.
Mm.
They don't compete.
Montessori,
Well, no, because they don't have to.
Right.
the
But
Steiner
if they
schools, the
had to,
Montessori.
if if everybody got a check for their student to be used to, for their education, then the public school would produce, because they're going to lose students to the schools that are producing. And it would also allow for, if Kiwi wants her child to learn about, I mean, there's a minimum, like the reading, writing, arithmetic. I'm not talking about tough tests, but there's a minimum I would want to see that everyone is teaching, some basics,
Mm.
not hard to pass tests, but just let's be sure that they're at least covering the subjects. And from there,
Uh,
the school should get to teach. They can offer whatever, natural healing, or horse racing, or whatever. Um, how to, whatever,
Well, the problem
mechanics, or
the problem with that is, again, the parents are not involved in the curriculum of the students, and some of that is because of the
well,
demand on people
and
working.
so
But that's what I'm
those
saying. So like what they would do
those
is,
parents would go to the private, I mean, would go to the public school probably.
the problem we have is, again, is what you're saying is like, okay, so they want to learn this certain basic curriculum. The problem is when I was at home, we learned that basic curriculum. I think I was 2 years old. I was at a sixth grade reading level. So we learned that at home, but parents nowadays don't have that ability, because how many parents are working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table? They don't even have time to take care of their kids now. So now it's like, here's the tablet, learn. And then what happens with the tablet? Well, why do I have to learn how to write them? Because I could just type it. I don't have to learn how to spell because it has autocorrect.
Every child is at a different level and with different gifts. And
but
I believe,
but they don't celebrate that in schools, those different gifts or levels. They put you in here, everybody learn this subject. You're in 6th grade. You're all learning the same thing, social studies, and that's it.
And as a parent, if you put your child in a school that they're gonna get what you want them to get, you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
It depends on money.
But how many of the schools anywhere, well, in the Western world, actually will allow children to learn anything apart from what the government curriculum is written down as? You know, I mean, I believe that children should know their 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yes.
At least so that they can read a safety sign and they can tote up their bit of money or their number of beans. You know, but there are so many children nowadays that can't even do that, because like Rosemary said, you know, their parents are having to go out and work 2 and 3 jobs. They're not home to read to their children. And when they are home, all they want to do is get some sleep, get up to go back to work the next day. So they don't read their children's storybooks. You know, it's a time factor thing, and there's a whole generation coming through now. I don't know about over the States, but here in New Zealand, it's quite illiterate.
Yes.
As far as you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
We've gotten dumber as a society.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I believe that school vouchers would correct a great deal of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was reading a little bit the other week about the Montessori, the Steiner schools, and how they work, you know, where children are sort of basically allowed to do what they want, but they are learning while they're playing. And you know, in some ways, I think that's quite a good idea as well. You know, the children that are coming out from them are actually quite well educated, because it's a whole different. It's not the standard.
But you're holding that up against the bar of what it is to be just barely to just be moderately educated.
Yeah. I mean, if you really,
it's not like before, probably back when you were in school, where there were kids where they were miles and years ahead of what everybody else was.
And
now just to be miles and years ahead of somebody, you have to be able to put a whole sentence together. That's not really a benchmark.
That's
there, Grandma.
That's where the whole where Einstein wasn't good at certain subjects in school at all. He would be considered a dummy, and yet he had these brilliant ideas. Kind of the same thing with Newton, but if you really look back on Einstein and Newton, they had problems like what we would call today ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
And they're not people are saying that's a disease. It's really not. Again, what you were saying, the schools where, I believe in Sweden, I think it's in Sweden, it might be in Finland, I think, but they are developing schools in which case the kids go to certain areas that they're good at. They learn the basics, how to read and write, so they can get to that table. But if they're really good at science, why are you going to spend years cramming like trigonometry into their head?
Literacy and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Why cram it in their head when you can actually start with what they're good at, and then common threads, what is relative, and bring those other subjects in, but start with what they're good at. If they're good at science, start with science and then see how it equates to math, and then see how it equates to music and vibration and art and all of that. You start there instead of starting with everything and cramming it into their heads.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you get children or young people that are absolutely brilliant working with their hands, and they don't have as many skills in the literacy departments, but they can, as long as they can follow a plan and that's where you need to know your basics. But they're brilliant at doing carpentry skills or welding or something like that they're really interested in. So that's where they should be put into and be able to bring those skills out. And then from doing that, they will soon learn to read a plan, because they know if they want to build that building, they have to know how much materials they need. So that's bringing in all these other skills sort of under the table without actually forcing the child to sit down and do simple addition. But yeah, I've never sort of stopped to think about voucher schools, because we have a slightly different curriculum here as well. But yeah, I know at one stage here they were doing that kind of thing, and the government changed, so that got kicked out the door, and that's when a lot of young people just left school because there was nothing there to hold their interest.
It's kind of, I mean, that is why we're having, like I said, we have these difficulties. It's that playtime is, again, the playtime is very, again, out in the, like we were talking about, going out and playing in the dirt and the muds. How much, I don't know how, I've actually learned more playing outside about science and nature, but science in general, and how the world works, the framework, by just watching plants grow, by watching how insects move, watching how plants are, that, and that goes back to what you're talking about, old ways, which aren't very old. They're just more earth-based. You learn more from watching how things grow, watching how where do clouds come, condensation, where does it come from, how does it flow. Now that equates to science. Now you're able to go backwards and kind of go back into a molecular place. Now you can go micro and macro, you can go back to a global place, and all of that starts to become a world ecosystem. We're not learning that if we're not cultivating that creative side. We're not going back to the inner child, which came up in the readings today, on, if you check out the Facebook. It's, again, cultivating that inner child, that playtime, that moment of freedom to go out and not be afraid of the world. Everybody's so afraid of getting dirt in their mouth because they get sick and potentially pass away, that they're afraid to even go out and explore the world. People are just literally sitting in their houses exploring it from a phone or a tablet. And how is that learning?
Yeah. It's not the same as getting out and feeling the grass under your feet, or watching a sunrise or a sunset. And yeah, it's just, yeah, that's where I learned a lot of my science from, was being outside and being involved. You know,
I think there's a big shift obviously coming in that, because we see it now. Now we're seeing it in society, how detrimental it's become, that we're in this materialistic kind of viewpoint right now, instead of this going back to being in nature, like you're saying. And you can see it in society, how it's affecting people, it's affecting health, it's affecting everything right now. So I feel like people are searching for more ways to explore, learn, experience life than what is being offered currently with this old, I'm saying old paradigm, the old way of it, the cookie cutter, the brick in the wall, the conveyor belt of just, here, shoot it out, you're done, you're learned. So now go out in the world, and it's like, and they get there and they're like, wait, none of this makes sense, because that's not what the real world is. And I'm not talking about like in the sense of industrialism, but just in how the world in general works. They don't have that. They don't know, they don't experience it. They don't see the stories. They're not reading the stories. So it's just, again, I'm glad that we're doing the podcast to help bring about that. And waiting for Chameleon's here, Emerald tablets.
Yeah, I'm waiting for those as well. But we've also now got a group of children, I would say, what the most informative years, 6, 7, that have got 2 years where they had absolutely, well, in New Zealand, no social interaction.
Right.
They had to sit a metre apart in school.
Right.
They had to they weren't allowed to play together. They weren't allowed, and so psychologically, what is that going to be doing to those young children that are coming up now, that think that it's a fear to actually physically touch somebody?
Right.
you know,
manifesting fear, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
You manifest that into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, in those very formative years, they you know, how much psychological damage has that done? Regardless of whatever caused it. But I mean, if you're going to take 2 years out of a young person's life and not allow them to have that interaction with their mates, you know, push and shove and play and whatever, because just in case they catch a bug.
They're behind scholastically as well.
Yeah, they are, very much so. Very much so. The online learning, two of my grandchildren, they just lost it. They could not get the marks they needed, because a lot of the things they needed had to be done through actual physical contact with people. And because all the universities and that were shut down here, they had to repeat years because they just didn't get the marks because of not having the interaction, not just with their tutors, but with their peers as well. You know, being able to discuss things and work things out.
Even the simple thing of like field trips. I mean, going to field trips to like aquariums and wherever, and having that interaction outside. All of that was, like you said, for 2 years. They didn't have it. They didn't have that experience.
Yeah, well, I mean,
talking about that, Rose, we took a field trip in elementary school to a dairy farm, and that's one of the things that I'll always like. That happened, I don't know how many years ago, and I'm still talk about it.
See, you still have the we still have the memories of that.
Yeah. You know, it's I mean, we had the big 3-month lockdown, and then I think we had about 6 months. Then we went back into lockdown again. But like Auckland City was a lot longer in lockdown than the rest of the country. And so, you know, it's causing a lot of issues now. In all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
Because we're social people. You know, humans need some social contact. And if it's denied, I hate to think what it's done to the children. You know, I have to admit, for me, it really didn't change much in my life. But yeah, because I don't have a lot of human to human contact anyway. I meet a lot of people, but you know, it's sort of But for young people, that's so important.
It is. It's how you're building social connections, but we also know a lot of the children coming in are actually, again, they're spiritually, they have what you would call the live server, the home space. It's actually there, the newest code. And to help connect and help lift people up is, again, making those connections with people, with that energy connections. It does, in a sense, help us to build remote connections, to practice remote stuff. But again, it's having the human interaction. And I'm going to reflect on it as being, there was times, again, I was here alone quite often during even 2021, but not even having human interaction, to have a physical hug from a human being. That plays on your psychology a lot, like on your brain. And I'm an adult. Like, I mean, I cannot imagine as a child not having interactions.
Yeah. Or even teenage boy and girl being able to walk down the street holding hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that was bad.
Grandma,
you know,
that was
weren't
so
allowed to do that.
In my opinion, anyways. It was.
Yeah. I used to enjoy walking down the street holding my man's hand.
I think it's more for the girls.
Yeah, probably.
Than the guys.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because I can remember at times when Paul would just grab my hand when we're walking down the street.
Yeah, that's true.
It was probably to stop me from detouring off into the traffic or something like that, you know.
Come this way, not that way.
Yep. You're not walking on that angle. You've got to stay in a straight line. Yeah.
But yeah,
But
it's still the way, again, the way I say herded in a way, because I'm not going to say people are sheep. I'm just saying is that we have this collective mentality where people do think that way. Again, we're a collective, right? So if the more you believe, but you are collectively believing in something, and especially if it's a fear-based mentality, the more that we manifest it in our world. So it's why it's very, I say, important, why having people come as we converge on this one timeline, that we have that, it's again the compassion, right back to the story, the compassion, the nurturing on here, so that we're not in a fear mode, we're not growing up afraid, even if it was in a figment of their imagination and it wasn't a grandmother that helped the boys. It's the fact that even if they were in that survival mode and never made it out of the pine trees, that they're still having hope, they're still manifesting something better for themselves, through that hope, through that positivity, instead
yeah,
of focusing on the negative, on the fear.
yeah, yeah. Like our little collective that's building up here. You can still have a collective, but if it's not based on fear and standover tactics and things like that, it's going to hopefully grow and thrive, because of people caring for people, and trying to help where they can help. It's just not butting in, but if help is required and you're capable of doing it, or if you're not, I might say, look, I don't know how I can help you, but maybe Chief can, or maybe Chameleon can, or maybe, and to be able to actually admit that we don't know everything, and put it to the people that may have the resources to help those people.
Yep. And I like that. It's, again, I was just saying, it's a judge-free zone, because as much as, and we were talking about timelines earlier, as much as if somebody doesn't agree with or buy into whatever explanation I have for a timeline, and I'm not asking them to believe a certain way, I'm just giving them the idea of looking at the wider scope, and I'm not saying they're wrong. Again, your experience, your life experience, how can I tell you it's wrong? Nope, that's wrong. You totally, you saw aliens your entire life, you're wrong, you're crazy. No, you experienced it, you went through it, it's your universe, it's your timeline, it's what you went through. It would be the same or equivalent of me telling Chief that your story is completely wrong, Chief, it's all of it's wrong, and that would never happen. That's an experience, it's a story, it happened.
It has happened.
Yes.
And just from, and not even from the person you're talking about, just my sister, I gave, because I got 10 copies of the book right before it came out.
Okay.
And I gave my sister one, my oldest brother two, and then I gave my one uncle one, and then I sent a few out. I sent one to Kiwi and a few other people. And so she cut, so like a couple weeks after I handed everybody their book, it was like, hey, look at this sort of thing. She comes back and she's like, well, I didn't like two of the stories. I was like, how did you not like two of the stories? Can you tell me which ones? No, I just didn't like them. I was like, wow. While everybody else is being like, hey, that's so great and all this sort of thing, she's like, I didn't like two of them. And I was like, well, can you tell me which ones it was?
Mm.
And she's like, no.
Is it because it actually, she could read something in those stories pertaining to her life? Although you didn't write about her, could she see something in those stories that, affected her like that?
Well, in a way, Grandma, I try to write my stories in a way that it not directly attacks you, but it makes you think about your experience. And it may not be the best of experience, but still I'm affecting you in a certain way,
Yeah. And if something happens to trigger you, well, then maybe you should actually have a look.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's, again, which go back to our first story, which is, again, with the maiden. that goes right back to that one where it's like, okay, well, was she the villain of the story, or was she the person that was showing the truth?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and can that equate to healing? Like, how do we heal with that? Because if you have a trigger, or if something's triggering you, then there is something there that it requires to look at for healing. However, we do have people that go out of their way to constantly trigger a person and keep them, again, in that fear-based mode. We see this every day. And it may not even be something that is truly there at all. It's just something because somebody wants to control another individual. So,
Yeah.
again, your stories,
Yeah.
I find that are multiple perspective. They have value, and then they teach. And as I said, everybody's story, everybody's journey, that's why we have story time, is there, it's valid. It's their voice, it's their truth, it's what they lived through. So for me to tell them it's not true, I mean, like, who am I to say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we each have our own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And where we end up is up to us. If we're going to end up being on such low vibration that we can't lift our head above the ground, well, that's not going to benefit us or anyone. And you've got to work at picking up, keeping your vibrations up, and keeping your head up, because it's not easy.
No.
It's not a simple journey. It's quite a hard thing to do. I try most of the time when I'm out and about in public to smile at everybody. I get some really weird looks, but
Yeah.
that's all right. But you'll get the odd person that will just actually smile back, and you can just see their whole body language lift.
Yeah.
A smile costs nothing, and yet it can give someone so much pleasure.
I think if I went and just smiled at, let's just be honest here, most of the people here are white, right? If I just went around smiling at most of the white people, they would probably call the police.
Well, I am white, but I'm unusual. So when I go around and smile at people, yeah, they probably, a few of them feel uneasy. That's quite possible.
Yeah. I mean, even me smiling at some people, you can see an unease in them. So, and those are the kind of people I'd like to know what's triggering them.
Yeah, that's true.
I talk to anyone within distance of talking to. So I'm probably begin a conversation.
Yeah. Well, living my lifestyle, I meet. Yeah, I meet and talk to so many people from all sorts of different nationalities, creeds, classes, whatever. It's and I do enjoy it.
We got a pretty good mix here, and people are pretty friendly in my little town.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of people here.
Yeah. Yeah, have you got a little, like, are you sort of like in a community within a community?
Well, there's a lot of people in South Florida, but it's it's kind of got a little, for as many people that are here, it sort of has a small town feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people here, but it's different. It's more of a bedroom community. It's different than the rest around here.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't like going to the city.
Race wise, very mixed.
Yeah.
I say with that, we end this podcast. We can keep talking on here. And again, anybody is welcome to join the podcast and tell their story. And again, we have some wonderful people here. We've had a few different people on. You're more than welcome to come back, enjoy more of the story time. And again, Chief, I will put your information in the description box. Chameleon, we're looking forward to Emerald Tablet readings. If anybody's interested in that, would be awesome. And like I said, it's a great place for us to come and connect, talk about perspective, connect together common threads in all different walks of life, all different ages groups here we have. So I will end it at that. And thank you guys all for coming on. It's a pleasure having you guys here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the story, Chief.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank
Chief.